Matt Rhule's first season with the Nebraska Cornhuskers yielded a 5-7 football team that was plagued from trash play at the quarterback position, injuries and inconsistencies from the wide receiver position, and overall, as it applies to the entire roster, poor strength and conditioning, coaching, and development that mostly stemmed from the Scott Frost era. This team was out of gas and broken mentally and physically by year's end, and they choked, just like Scott Frost teams did, multiple close games throughout the year. However, given that most of the team was projected to return in 2024, it was a young team in 2023, partially filled with transfers. It was Matt Rhule's first year. He's traditionally known for gutting teams and getting out the garbage before seriously building a foundation. With him being in year two, many good players returning, and the Huskers bringing in a top 25 recruiting class, it was assumed that they would improve in 2024, but the quarterback position remained a question with, at the time, only Chubba Purdy and Heinrich Harburg left in the room after the 2023 season concluded. But on December 18th, that changed with Dylan Raiola's commitment. And Raiola gives this Nebraska team, who has plenty of veterans, plenty of experience, a great coaching staff, and players that you and I don't even know about ready to break out, a chance to truly hit their ceiling this season. So on today's episode with College Football with Sam, I'm going to be talking about Dylan Raiola's impact and why even the most diehard of Nebraska fans who are drinking the Kool-Aid, and even analysts like myself, Joel Klatt, and anyone else who's high on Nebraska probably are underestimating young Raiola's impact on this team. Welcome back, fellow football fanatics. It's your host, College Football with Sam. Before we resume this glorious content, please hit that like button and share this video around so that we can get new college football fans and hit 20,000 subscribers by the end of the 2024 preseason. It's an ambitious goal, but college football is an ambitious sport. I intend to be ambitious, and this is one of the best communities in college football on YouTube. I want to make it the best, and it's the best Big Ten-centered football community on YouTube. And liking the video helps boost engagement, get us into the algorithm. It helps more Nebraska fans, Michigan fans, Ohio State fans, Michigan State fans, Big Ten fans, and college football fans of any kind find this video and this channel and this community easier. So doing that and sharing this video helps a lot. What also helps to get to that 20,000 subscribe number is subscribing if you haven't already. I myself will watch good college football or non-college football content, and I'm enjoying it, and I forget that I'm not following said channel. So subscribing helps out YouTube creators a ton, and clicking that notification bell will also allow you to get notified when I release new college football content. And comment how much of an impact you think Dylan Raiola will have on this upcoming season down in the comments below. And last but certainly not least, if you want to support this channel monetarily, check out my Patreon page or my merchandise store via the links in the description or the pinned comment. You can get a Nebraska-themed College Football with Sam t-shirt if you want, just a black or white College Football with Sam t-shirt, or any Big Ten school-themed t-shirt if you want. There's also sweatshirts, there's even a mug and some stickers that are College Football with Sam themed. And if you want some bonus content that will slowly trickle out as the season approaches and ramp up more quickly when the regular season hits and really when August hits, you can check out my Patreon page and sign up as an All-American or Heisman member. Heisman members get the perks of directly contacting me and me answering as soon as I can, and also getting signed merchandise after 6 months of membership. All conference members, just like all of my members though, and all of my subs, are appreciated, and your name will be featured along with all of my patrons at the beginning and end of every video with a shout out at the end. But let's dive right in and talk about Nebraska football and Dylan Raiola. Dylan Raiola is a talented quarterback. I mean, that's why Ryan Day and Ohio State wanted him very badly. That's why Ohio State's fan base and staff was bummed out when he decommitted and then committed to Georgia. That's why Georgia's staff and fan base was bummed out when He committed to Nebraska and decommitted from Georgia. He was a highly sought-after quarterback. Highly sought after. And despite the fact that he lost his number one standing in the 2024 recruiting class, Julian Sayin, I believe, finished ahead of him as the number one overall quarterback, committed to Alabama after Saban abruptly retired, then transferred to Ohio State. I think he'll be a future star. Sayin will. And I also think the same thing about Raiola. Raiola has phenomenal upside, and while the game from high school to college is very different in some regards, talent and skill, work ethic, and intelligence translate. Again, both play football, high school and college. They both play the game. There are just some differences and obviously a higher level of play. But Raiola is great fundamentally. He has the frame built to be a quarterback that will survive in college football, that could thrive in college football, and could thrive in the NFL. Again, 6'3", 230 pounds. That's his frame. He weighs more than J.J. McCarthy, and I believe is about the same height, if not maybe an inch taller. I forget. But one of McCarthy's concerns, and he was a near elite to elite college QB by the time his tenure at Michigan ended. He's off with the Vikings now, first-round quarterback. A concern with him was his weight and his overall frame, that he didn't have like enough muscle and even body fat on him. He was just too thin. That's not a concern with Raiola whatsoever. 230, 6'3". His dad was an offensive lineman, so he has that physical body, that strength and power, and that's not his only skill set either. He has multiple skill sets. He can throw the ball from multiple angles. He can throw it like a baseball, throw it traditionally. He has pocket awareness. He doesn't turn it over. He's accurate. He completed over 60% of his passes, 63.6% of his passes, I think to be exact, and threw for 34 touchdowns, leading his high school in Georgia to an 11-2 record, and only threw one interception. That was all in his senior season, playing Georgia players. Georgia is one of the best states for high school talent in the entire country. He competed there, jumped around from multiple high schools. That was a criticism against him from multiple fan bases, and even some Nebraska fans were concerned about that. But he has won everywhere he's been. He's been successful. He's balled out. And 34 touchdowns to one pick. I don't care that was high school football. That's very, very impressive. Now, what you don't want, obviously, is what Drew Aller was with Penn State last year, where I think he had 25 passing touchdowns and 2 picks, completed about the same amount of his passes as Raiola did for his senior year in high school in 2023, same season as Aller was a sophomore in college football with Penn State. But Aller didn't use his big arm that much, and he just didn't look good. He really didn't. I mean, that Penn State offense was lethargic given its talent and also given the amount of points it scored per game, which was top 20 nationally. But we can thank Penn State's defense and run game and overwhelming talent for that. But we're talking about Nebraska. That's probably Dylan Raiola's floor, or maybe a little bit lower. And Aller was still, relative to all football bowl subdivision teams, a above average to good quarterback. Raiola's ceiling is limitless. He can put the ball anywhere on the field. Again, throw from multiple angles, positions. He's mobile for 230 pounds as well and 6'3". I watched him a bit in the spring game, and he was able to scramble for a few yards. I think at one point he may have picked up a first down. I don't know if it was a first and 10 or a second and 10, full traditional 10 yards, or if it was maybe after a run or a short pass and it was just a few yards. But he has some mobility. It reminds me a little bit, I heard someone else use this comparison of like Patrick Mahomes's scrambling ability, where Mahomes isn't fast, but he's very aware of his body and surroundings, and he can reliably pick up short yardage. There's probably better comparisons, as Mahomes is an elite NFL player. Raiola was elite in high school. We'll see if he can even be elite in college, which will be hard to do. But he certainly has the talent to be elite in college. And at Nebraska, You're not going to have Ohio State or Georgia's supporting cast, but you're not going to have Kennesaw State's or Akron's supporting cast either. Nebraska's offensive line returns really 4 key contributing players, and they add a 5th in Micah Mezcua from Florida, who had multiple starts at Florida and then prior to Florida at Baylor. Teddy Prohaska, Ben Scott, Turner Corcoran, and Bryce Benhart return. Scott was the starting center last year at Nebraska, also started at Arizona State. Prohaska and Benhart are the 2 projected starting tackles right now per ourlads.com. And Turner Corcoran is expected to be in the mix. If he's going to start anywhere, it will be at guard. All of these players have playing experience, and they will be stronger than the 2023 offensive line. Over 4,000 snaps return. And they have some questions at pass block, but per PFF, they were rated at about 65 per, that's the average rating per snap for returning Nebraska offensive linemen, which is about the same as Michigan's for context. I think Michigan's offensive line is going to be great this year, even though they lose a ton. That's partially because of their reputation, recruiting, and development. And I don't know if you can give Nebraska that exact same benefit of the doubt, but they certainly return more than Michigan does. And Donovan Raiola worked wonders with that group. And I think Matt Rhule and his staff, especially the strength and conditioning staff, did last year. The offensive line under Scott Frost was a known weakness. It was one of the weakest offensive lines in the Big Ten. This year's offensive line won't be the strongest or even close to the strongest in the Big Ten, in my opinion, but it will be the strongest and most physical offensive line that Nebraska has seen in quite some time, and their specialty is run blocking. And don't worry, we're going to get to the running backs, of course. This is a very deep Cornhusker running back room, very deep Cornhusker backfield. This offensive line is not going to be elite. It's not going to provide you an infinite amount of time to stand in the pocket and throw, but with Raiola's pocket awareness, I don't think that will necessarily be a problem as long as they can be decent, above average, good at pass blocking against a team like Ohio State. If their defense plays to its ceiling and improves its pass rush, it'll need to be a great pass blocking O-line, but beating Ohio State I don't think is in the bucket list for Matt Rhule in year 2 and him and his team's goals. They can have a phenomenal season even with a loss to Ohio State. This offensive line only allowed 30 sacks last year, and many of those, whether it's Harburg or Sims in particular, were caused because those quarterbacks did not have pocket awareness, and they just simply were not that good. The offensive line wasn't good either last year, but again, much better than other offensive lines with more talented, even NFL players that Scott Frost had. And with Mezcua coming in, he was rated over 70 points by Pro Football Focus in run blocking. Prohaska and Benhart were rated highly. Ben Scott was rated all right. Corcoran was the lowest rated main contributor that's returning, but he was highly talented out of high school. Maybe he can improve, or I wouldn't necessarily use this term often, but because of how bad he's been, maybe he can be fixed or helped by this coaching staff and by Donovan Raiola, but we'll have to see. They'll be stronger than they were in 2023, more experienced, and with a better defense, what should be a better defense, and a better quarterback. I'm 99% sure Raiola will be better than Harburg, Purdy, or Sims were last year, and better receivers. The offensive line should have an easier time overall, as more so being a unit of the offense rather than being the thing that's trying to hold a dysfunctional offense together. Nebraska's running back room, their backfield, what will be behind the offensive line that I talked about, and what will help take off some of the pressure from Dylan Raiola, features Ramir Johnson, Gabe Ervin Jr., Emmett Johnson, and Dante Dowdle. And in total, all of those players rushed for 762 combined yards last year and 4 touchdowns. Gabe Ervin Jr. and Ramir Johnson have been around college football for much longer than that. Ramir Johnson had a good year in 2021, and Gabe Ervin Jr. was hyped up both in 2021 and 2022. Unfortunately, him, along with even Ramir Johnson, suffered injuries. There's a theme with injuries and players not performing to their ceiling under Scott Frost, and Gabe Ervin Jr. and Ramir Johnson are Scott Frost holdovers that have decided to stay with Matt Rhule, admirably so. And Gabe Ervin Jr., before he got injured last year, looked great. Looked like a classic Big Ten power back. And Ramir Johnson is capable as a receiving back. There's not much proven production in this running back room, but Emmett Johnson and Dante Dowdle, Johnson at Nebraska last year, Dowdle at Oregon last year, they look great as young players. Dowdle looked great in the spring game, and Emmett Johnson, he's young. So the fact that he started last year, rushed for over 400 yards, was able to showcase a power ability, a will to fight, and get meaningful snaps, I think is going to help his career blossom. Love him as a running back. I think that he embodies Nebraska. He embodies what Matt Rhule wants to build at Nebraska. Powerful, don't quit, always churning. That's who Emmett Johnson is. And Gabe Ervin Jr., before he was unfortunately sidelined, was that too. And Ramir Johnson, along with Ervin Jr., are older running backs who have experience, and if they're healthy, they can break out. And that running back room can be a Swiss Army knife, where you have Dowdle with the explosiveness, you have Emmett Johnson and Gabe Ervin Jr. with the power, and you have Ramir Johnson, who is like a light version of Donovan Edwards in the sense that he's much smaller than Edwards. Again, light addition, not perfect comparison, but he showcased a great ability of being a receiver out of the backfield. Just look at the game against Michigan in 2021 where he just kept torching Mike McDonald's defense, head coach of the Seahawks now, with wheel routes. And he was temporarily moved to wide receiver under Mark Whipple's offense in 2022. And finally, when it comes to the supporting cast that Raiola will work with, the wide receiver and tight end rooms. The wide receiver rooms feature Jamal Banks, Isaiah Nayer, Malachi Coleman, and Jalen Lloyd. I can't even believe I could name all of those guys without seeing their first names on the screen, but it is what it is. They had just over 1,000 receiving yards last year and 8 receiving touchdowns in 2023. Isaiah Nayer is an incoming transfer. Jamal Banks, also an incoming transfer, All-ACC honorable mention from Wake Forest. He had the bulk of these receiving yards, as the leading receiver for Nebraska last year was Billy Kemp IV, who had 310 receiving yards and only 1 receiving touchdown. Fedoni led the team in receiving touchdowns with 4. Nebraska's quarterback room last year, this is where we can really begin to dive in to Raiola's direct impact, as the quarterback is going to more often be involved with his receivers and tight ends than the offensive line and running back, though of course they play a critical part in molding the offense, therefore molding how the quarterback's impact will be applied. Heinrich Haarberg didn't even complete 50% of his passes, had a 1-to-1 TDINT ratio, and averaged 6.2 yards per pass, and had a 106.6 passer rating. Jeff Sims in QBR had a 20.5 QBR and a 91.5 passer rating. A Deacon Hill, for context, had an 87.4 passer rating and an 18.5 QBR. Just horrific numbers. In fact, I would say that Nebraska had more disappointing quarterback play than Iowa last year, because it was expected that Iowa would at best probably have above average quarterback play from Cade McNamara. He got hurt. I don't think anyone believed that Deacon Hill would be special, given Brian Ferentz's, or he who shall not be named, formerly offensive coordinator for the Hawkeyes, now offensive analyst at Maryland. Given his proven track record of being terrible at developing players at the quarterback position. Jeff Sims, a lot was expected from him, rightfully or unrightfully so, in the 2023 preseason. And after Haarberg's first 2 games, there was a decent amount expected from him too. And at the end of the day, they were awful. I think Haarberg looked much better in the spring game, and I think that he could actually be a good QB this season, though he'll I'm 95% sure he'll be the backup. In fact, you can round that to 100%. He'll contribute, especially in running the ball, wildcat plays, maybe some trick plays even with passing the ball, and he'll definitely be the main backup to Raiola. But he looked better and he improved. Sims transferred to Arizona State, and I forget where Chubba Purdy transferred to exactly, but it's irrelevant. This receiver room will benefit from a player like Raiola, who has a strong arm, who's accurate, who's aware in the pocket, who will be able to, because of his awareness, his arm strength, and accuracy, he'll be able to make throws as he's hit where the receivers can catch them. He will be able to dodge incoming edges, defensive ends, defensive tackles, and linebackers, maybe even safeties and corners, and get it to Fidone or get it to Jamal Banks. Whereas Jeff Sims or Heinrich Harburg would have instinctively tried to run first and either get tackled for a loss, barely a gain, get hit hard in the face and sacked and have turf all over their helmet. Either way, running and getting hit expends more energy, wastes more energy than throwing the football, which should be the quarterback's first assignment and first duty. This receiver room will produce so much more than they did. I mean, Nair, he'll get an opportunity to start where he was really buried in the depth chart at Texas, and Jamal Banks did not have good quarterback play either at Wake Forest. After Hartman transferred out, I think Griffin, I forget his last name, started at quarterback for the Demon Deacons, and he just wasn't good. It was fairly evident that he wasn't from their first game of the season against an FCS opponent. So Banks and Nair will have either a better opportunity or just a much better quarterback to work with. And Coleman and Lloyd, especially with his explosiveness, combine that with Raiola's arm strength. That is a duo that I think we should all pay attention to. Lloyd with his explosiveness, having the most receiving touchdowns out of any Nebraska wide receiver last year, and he also averaged 39.5 yards per reception. He had 6 receptions for 237 yards. Yeah. Fast, I think deep ball threat, and Raiola has one of the stronger arms probably out of any quarterback in the Big Ten, because this is going to be a down year for quarterbacks in college football, given all of the first-round quarterback talent that left after the 2023 season. And in the Big Ten in particular, McCord's gone to Syracuse, and he was good for a Big Ten quarterback, good quarterback overall. McCarthy, he's gone to the NFL, and same thing with Bo Nix, Michael Penix, and Caleb Williams, who are all on Pac-12 teams that were joining the Big Ten starting in 2024. The tight end room with Fidone and Borkacher, they're going to be reliable. Fidone, with, again, a better quarterback, should produce even bigger numbers than he did last year. Got close to 300 receiving yards, had 4 receiving touchdowns for the Cornhuskers. They added no transfers at tight end, unlike receiver, but I think the staff has faith in Borkacher, obviously faith in Fidone, who proved he's great when healthy. And I've heard that Janarian Bonner, the former fullback, I've heard that he might get some work at tight end and wide receiver. Very good at blocking. That's what he primarily did at fullback last year. Physical player. I've heard some whispers that he could get some time. And having a wide receiver who can block, an explosive threat, a reliable player like Banks, a great tight end who's versatile in Fidone, all of these things help the offense function better. That helps take off pressure from a true freshman quarterback in Raiola. That also allows him to really unlock his ceiling. Better blocking at the receiver position allows for a better run game, which will open up opportunities in the pass, because Raiola's specialty, from his high school scouting report, is play action. And with Nebraska's offensive line, their running back room, tight end room, their receivers should be better at blocking than they perhaps have ever been, at least in the Scott Frost era, the Mike Riley era, and last year with Matt Rhule's first year and company. That will allow this offense to do a variety of things, and that will make the play action game, if Raiola plays up to his talent, or even just is an above average to good quarterback, not even a great near elite one. He doesn't need to be Trevor Lawrence for this passing offense in this receiver room to take off and be properly utilized. They're full of capable players that balance reliability, explosiveness, and experience rather nicely. Some big games for Dylan Raiola. Games where I think you will see what type of quarterback he is. I'm not going to include Colorado or Ohio State. Nebraska could run 80% of the time. And depending on how Colorado's offense does and how Nebraska's defense does, how that matchup goes, Nebraska, with Colorado's questions on defense and how much they return on offense and how stacked their running back room is, the Cornhuskers, they could probably run 80% of the time and win that game. Dylan Raiola could be, to put it extremely, Nebraska's Blake Barnett, and the Cornhuskers could win that game. Colorado just has way too many unknowns to where I don't know if you will see what quarterback Raiola is. But against Rutgers, who is a proven defense, who's returning around 70% of their production, they have Robert Longerbeam and Flip Dixon returning in that secondary. And they also have Mohamed Toure and Tyreme Powell. And at defensive end, Aaron Lewis. Several players who will be on the preseason All Big Ten team lists and my All Big Ten team, which I'll make content on that. As the weeks of college football continue to tick down, several Nebraska defenders, and even Dylan Raiola, I will tell you, will make that list, whether honorable mention or third, second, or first team. So if you haven't already, again, hit the notification bell and subscribe, so when that type of content drops and my Big Ten predictions video updated drops, you can get notified of that. But Rutgers, that'll be a test. He'll have to be accurate and efficient, too, in the red zone, because you know that Greg Schiano and Rutgers, they're going to bow up. They're going to make adjustments, and their run game is one of the few in the Big Ten that I can confidently say will be better than Nebraska's. Their offensive line was more proven than Nebraska's last year. It returns about the same amount of production. And Kyle Monangai was way better than Gabe Ervin Jr., Emmett Johnson, Ramir Johnson, or Dante Dowdle. He comes back. He'll still be way better. He's one of the best running backs in the entire country. And primarily, Rutgers is a run-first team. They have Ethan Kaliak-Manis at quarterback. So Nebraska's defense with Rutgers' offense and how Rutgers wants to play ball, it'll probably be a lower scoring game, but it will be very tough for either offense to move on either defense. And I think you'll see what type of player Raiola is in that game, because he'll have to be patient. He'll have to be accurate. There probably won't be many explosive plays. If there are, then kudos to him. That's a good sign. But scoring in the red zone and not turning it over in a game like that will be priority. At USC, the Trojans will have a better defensive staff and an elite offense. To put it simply, he might need to engage in a shootout, or it could be, this would be awkward, but it could happen, a similar type of game to the one I'm expecting when Nebraska hosts Rutgers. That game could be anything, and I mean anything. And Raiola will have to do whatever is asked of him for Nebraska to have a chance at winning or to win that game in the Coliseum. He'll need to play well for 4 full quarters. That's what I know when Nebraska takes the road at USC. And finally, the rivalry game at Iowa. Iowa is known for their ball-hawking defensive backs. They return Sebastian Castro. They have the best linebacker in the country in Jay Higgins coming back. And Nick Jackson's also an elite running back. They have Xavier Nwampka, who's Iowa's only 5-star or high-level 4-star, depending on what recruiting service you ask, starting at safety. And Phil Parker is a genius, the best defensive coordinator in the country. LeVar Woods is the best special teams coordinator in the country. Oh, and Iowa actually has an offensive coordinator now, not just a nepotism hire. Not that their offense will be any good, but I don't think they'll be trash like they were the previous 2 seasons. Raiola will need to score, as I expect Iowa to score more against Nebraska than they have over the previous 2 seasons. And he'll have to withstand the crowd noise. That's going to be an intense game as it's at night, and Kinnick Stadium is loud. There will be psychological warfare. There will be tricks. There will be that rivalry element. That game in particular will tell you what type of player Dylan Raiola is, and it's fitting because it's the end of the season. So you'll get that full 12-game picture. Hopefully he stays healthy for all 12 games of who he is, and that will tell us a much better story. Even just his first few games, but especially a whole season, will tell us much more about him than his entire high school career and recruiting rankings will. So his impact is massive, and he could decide the season whether it is a success or whether it is, well, we went bowling, but there's still an odd taste in our mouth because we started out 6-1 or 7-0 and finished 6-6, 7-5, and just we really didn't capitalize on our schedule and on the talent we have in our roster. Nebraska doesn't have an elite offensive line. Michigan in 2022, for example, they had J.J. McCarthy, who was a true sophomore. He was a true freshman in 2021, wasn't ready to take the reins then. He was ready in 2022. He didn't have this incredible year. He was good. He was a top 20, top 25 quarterback. Some would argue top 15 that season. But Michigan didn't need him to win double-digit games. They needed him against Ohio State in the first half to keep them within striking distance, and then Donovan Edwards, the offensive line and the defense, took care of it from there. And then against Penn State, it was purely the ground game. Sorry for the pause. I was thinking of the TCU game. That's where Michigan needed McCarthy to be a great quarterback. But by then, they were already 13-0. They won the Big Ten. They exceeded expectations. Nebraska doesn't have that type of O-line. They don't have a Joe Moore Award O-line like Michigan did in 21, 22, in the playoffs in 23, even like Ohio State did in 22. Ohio State had the elite quarterback, but they had an offense that's probably going to be worse than Nebraska's. They had a defense, rather, that will probably be worse than Nebraska's will be this season. I think Tony White's a top 10 defensive coordinator. With how much he returns, this defense will be just as good as last year's, if not better. I think it'll be better at pass rush, better at run stoppage, better in the secondary. The question's at linebacker, which is important, but they had depth there last year, so I expect a player or two to step up. With a great defense, a receiver core that's capable, and with his talents, the biggest questions of what can hold him back are Marcus Satterfield and Glenn Thomas, the co-offensive coordinators. How will they game plan? And this offensive line, which I think has a limited ceiling. I don't think they'll be able to run 60+% of the time like Minnesota did in 21 or 22. That's a team, by the way, that could get 9 wins without having a good or great quarterback play. That's what they did. Muhammad Ibrahim up the middle, or Trey Potts up the middle, or Bucky Irving, Kai Thomas up the middle, toss, run up the middle, occasional play action pass, occasionally from the shotgun, but that's Kirk Shiraka for you. And then stingy defense. I don't think Nebraska can exactly win that way because they don't have a John Michael Schmitz or a Luke Whippler or an Olu Oluwatimi at center. Ben Scott's good. The offensive line should be good, but elite, I don't exactly know. So with that in mind, that puts more on Raiola's shoulders. And in order to maximize their ceiling, in order to be ranked at season's end, or in order to start off 6-1, 5-2 at the very worst, 7-0 at the very best, and then to maybe compete with Ohio State, or even if you want to put that game as an auto blowout, to beat one of USC, Iowa, Wisconsin, not have a letdown game against UCLA, and finish with 8 or 9 wins. They need a quarterback with elite potential, or with great potential, who doesn't turn over the ball and has exciting moments, and who plays much better than any of Nebraska's quarterbacks did last year. Dylan Raiola doesn't turn over the football. He has elite potential, and his strong arm meshes well with the talent that's at receiver. You just have to hope that Rhule and Satterfield properly utilize it. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts on this video down below. Thank you to Crash2488 and Braska Rascal for sponsoring this video as Heisman members. Thanks to Chris Lane and Connor Little OH for sponsoring this video as All-American members. And thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell for sponsoring this video and channel as all-conference members. Have a great day, guys, and I will see you all around. Go Big Red.